Nigerian music has gained more international attention as a result of the growth of the Afrobeats genre, which has seen the evolution of our indigenous pop sound and style on the international stage. Names like Two-Face Idibia, D'banj, Davido, Wizkid, Tiwa Savage, and Yemi Alade symbolize the faces of the generation's leaders raising the flag high. But this acceptance did not happen suddenly. It is the result of decades of honed genres and sounds. Considering the impact of Western sounds that played a vital part in molding our sound before and after independence, trying to show a detailed record of the history of Nigerian music is a lengthy path to travel. However, I'm going to take you through the decades of growth of the industry since 1960 in this video. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Apala music was a kind of music that evolved among amateur musicians and praise singers at events prior to Nigeria's independence in 1960. Haruna Ishola, who released the hit single Punctuality is the Soul of Business in 1960, and then a number of albums, including his most commercially successful song, Oroki Social Club, released late in the 60s, became one of the first Nigerian musicians to embark on a European tour. This helped popularize the Apala music among the Yorubas in the western part of the country. This decade also saw the rise of Ayinla Omowura in the early 1960s and Yusuf Olatunji in the early 1970s. Highlife, which started in Ghana, found a second home in Nigeria in the 50s, thanks to legends such as Bobby Benson, Cardinal Rex Lawson and Dr. Victor Laya, and other great highlife musicians like Chief Stephen Osita Osadebe and the late Oliver De Cook also playing an important role. Disco music and Afro-funk blossomed in the early 1970s thanks to the likes of the Sahara All-Stars from Jos, and then came Afrobeat in its controversial style. Afrobeat originated in Ghana, but it was completely transformed in Nigeria thanks to the late Fela Kuti's return to the nation from the West in 1967. Afrobeat is a blend of jazz, highlife, and funk. Fela's sons, Femi and Seun Kuti, Dede Mabiaku, Lagbaja, Orlando Julius, and some other Afrobeat musicians have contributed to carry on the genre's heritage by expressing it in new ways and making it appealing to a broader audience. The decade also saw the rise of rock music, which was well represented by T-Mac, who returned to Lagos as a 22-year-old man in the mid-1970s and formed a series of heavyweight psychedelic Afro-rock bands such as T-Mac and Afro Collection, and the eponymous T-Mac and the Backing Band. During the same decade, Fuji music grew in popularity. The music was pioneered by Sikiru Ayinde Barrister, who is credited with coining the term Fuji. Barrister entered the scene in the late 1960s, but it wasn't until the 70s and early 80s that he was able to make the genre mainstream appealing with songs like Bisimilai and Iliaye Dunpupo, both in the 70s, despite the fact that some of his biggest records like Fuji Garbage and Reality came later in the 90s and early 2000s respectively. In the same decade, Juju music became popular in the western part of Nigeria, thanks to musicians like Ayinde Bakare, Tunde Nightingale, Ike Dairo, Idowu Animashaun, and a few other Juju musicians including Prince Adekunle, who mentored the next generation of talent such as Sashino Peters and Segun Adewale. Fatai Rolling Dollar, King Sunny Ade, and Ebenezer Obey breathed fresh life into the Juju music genre before handing it over to newcomers like Dele Taiwo, Dayo Kujore, Professor YK Ajao, and a couple of others who made a name for themselves in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Juju music has always been popular in Lagos before the independence through major performers such as Ike Dairo, Ayinde Bakare, and J.O. Araba. But it wasn't until the 1980s that it received the popularity it deserved. King Sunny Ade received a Grammy nomination in 1983 for his album Synchro System, while Shina Peters released a hit in 1989 with the album Ehis, his sixth album of the decade. The mid-80s were the year that reggae music arrived in town. The music, which is associated with musicians from Jamaica, was adopted by artists such as Majek Fashek, who rose to prominence following the release of his 1988 album, Prisoner of Conscience, which featured the massive hit single, Send Down the Rain. Late Raskimono launched his highly praised album, Under Pressure, in 1989. Alex Zito had a hit single, Tickle Me, in 1988. Evie Edna Ogoli, Orit Wiliki, Daniel Wilson, and others all contributed to the genre's rise. Reggae was the music of the street across the country, and its influence was enormous and far-reaching because the message and style was connected with the public. This decade also saw the steady rise of FM radio stations, which enabled reggae music to attain countrywide recognition by controlling the airwaves. Plantation boys, who emerged towards the end of the 90s, created their style through the inspiration of the reggae sound, which later transformed into raga, or dance hall music, which became a movement in places like Ajegunle in Lagos. This shaped the ghetto sounds that were created by the likes of Papa Fryo, Daddy Shoki, Daddy Fresh, African China, Nico Gravity, and others. The reggae wave persisted in the early 1990s, transforming completely into raga, which was locally called Galala. Artists like Daddy Shoki and his Ajegunle companions maintained their influence until the late 1990s when the hip-hop genre emerged. The current wave of R&B and pop music emerged in the late 1990s with groups like Remedies, Plantation Boys, Tribesmen, and Def Oakland working with a new generation of producers like OJB Jezreel and Nelson Brown. Prior to that time, Nigerian music went through a phase in which the public struggled to identify with, allowing Western sounds to take over the airwaves. However, the advent of private radio stations such as Ray Power, as well as the entry of companies such as Kenny's Music, allowed space for songs like Shake Body and Shakomo to take over the charts and become popular recordings, ushering in a paradigm change in Nigerian music history. The success of the pioneering groups sparked a trend in which other groups and a younger generation of talent saw the emergence of a distinct sound with which they could identify, and many people both home and abroad began to associate with it. With the likes of Azados, Rasky, Idris Abdulkarim, Two-Face Idibia, and Maintain creating pop bangers that were rolling the street, this decade was undoubtedly the most effervescent age of the Nigerian music scene. Emboldened by their triumphs, both aesthetically and economically, diaspora stars like JJC and 419 Squad, D'banj and Don Jazzy returned to establish their own record labels, while Banky W also returned from the United States to claim the R&B kingdom. It was the decade that Nigerian pop musicians began to have their music exhibited on worldwide platforms and acknowledged for awards outside of the country's borders. Also, the quality of music videos released reached new heights. In this decade, Afrobeat is returned, but in a different shape, sound, idea, and even name, known as Afrobeats, with the addition of an S. Afrobeat, which is often distinguished by rapid percussions and a high tempo, is the dominant sound of this decade. It is a sound that incorporates elements of everything from Fela's Afrobeat to pop, Fuji, highlife, London grime, and even hip-hop. The genre is championing the rise of Nigerian artists to true global stars, with the likes of Burna Boy, Davido, and Wizkid performing on the world's biggest stages. Despite the fact that early successes such as Two-Face Idibia's African Queen and D'banj's Oliver Twist laid major foundations upon which this house has been built. There is Afrobeat and Afropop, yet in the quest for notoriety, the borders have been blurred and many who compose pop music find themselves leaning towards Afrobeat. However, names such as Techno, Yemi Alade, Tiwa Savage, and a slew of new talents are pushing a variant of the sound that is also highly popular across the continent and beyond. Thanks for watching this video. If you think this video has been helpful, please like this video and share. See you in the next one.